Okay, move on to Public Works, Ms. Coleman.
Yeah, I was just going to say about kind of how hard the crowd is today.
It's the person running the meeting.
I usually pop up and say a few words and everybody kind of giggles, but I so hard crowd.
The mayor's a little more lively than I am.
Yeah,
so
yeah. What's up?
I apologize.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm a little nervous.
I hurt my little feelings. So. Anyway, so I'll try to make this quick. I don't think I can go as quick as the chief in 38 seconds flat, but I can go quick. So this is just the presentation for Public Works. Basically, big, beautiful pictures is what we're showing, and so that is not a big, beautiful picture. So what that is our community center. I don't know if you can see that very well, but it pretty much is not a beautiful building. What I'm going to show you in the next slides, I don't want you to go for it yet.
Oh.
But anyway.
Too late.
This building is the only kind of area that we can rent out for a community. And when you walk, the inside was just as bad, if not worse, as the outside. When you walk in, it smelled like rat feces, cat urine, vomit, I don't know, whatever you want to say, kind of like an abandoned building. But anyway. The outside is in need of repair, and I put some prices down there. I did a little bit of estimating, and then also it needs a new roof. And then the inside, I mean, we want to rent this to our public and say, here's Woodland, rent our community center. And has anybody been in this building? Okay, so just honestly, did it smell good in there?
No.
Did it look good in there? Did it look like 1970s, had a party and it's been left that way since the 70s? Just saying,
Yes.
that's the way it looked.
Good
Okay,
description.
so to the next slide, please. So the carpet had massive stains on it. The in the kitchen, rotten in the kitchen floor. Linoleum was coming up. There's rot at the door as you walk in. Next slide, please. And so we decided to take it kind of back and started cleaning it up. So I had the guys put in all new flooring. I had them, cut out the rotten floor as you walked in. If you walked in, you could feel it squish underneath your feet. So we cut that out, and I'm not going to tell you what we found under the building, but we'll just say that we had that cut out. We had to reinforce that entry area, and then the guys, we had to put down new floors, paint the building, paint the ceiling, so on and so forth. So if you go to the next page. We also, there must have been 1 million pinholes in those walls where people put tacks from whatever the kind of party they're having or so on and so forth. So there are boards that were in there that actually had, I don't even know what kind of stain it was on them, and I don't want to know. It was on the wall, soda cans exploding, I'm not sure, but anyway. So we took all those boards down, we took care of the walls, put some new screens up, so on and so forth. One of the gals from our office said, hey, I have some great material I think will match. She brought in this material. We recovered all the boards. So then the next slide. And this is what it looks like now. So we put new blinds in, walls. It looks nice. I wouldn't be embarrassed to host a meeting there now. I think it's rentable. I think that people feel that it's really a lot of bang for your buck to rent out this community center. The next page. And so we also included, we actually had our traffic meeting for our trucking industry for exit 21 there, because it does hold 50 people, 49 people occupancy, so we were able to post quite a few individuals in there. You can see the boards are now up on the wall where people can actually pin things up there without putting them on the wall. We put in a screen, a projection screen. We moved the whiteboard to the other side so you can set it up either way if you want to use a whiteboard, projection screen in there. Next slide. And then the kitchen's been redone. We moved some appliances around. We lifted the microwave up, put some new shelving in there to give some counter space. Cleaned out the refrigerator. So there was stuff in the refrigerator, and so we just we cleaned it. So then the next page, and then we actually, and that's where you can go one way. You have a whiteboard. And then the other way you have the projection screen. And the nice thing about putting the blinds in there is that the library hosts a lot of events in there where they do, they need the room a little bit darker for their screen projection. And so by putting the blinds in there, they don't have to put up cork boards in the window or hang something from the wall as a sheet. So And if we go to the next page, and then we actually had a meeting in there, so we did fill the house when we had that meeting, and everybody was thrilled with the way it looked. So I was kind of, that's our big woohoo for the month. So, and then as Pete mentioned, we have on next Friday, Make Our Parks Your Sweetheart. So we're having a barbecue, and so there's going to be live music. There'll be a band that Sarah will have a fire going during lunchtime, and we're going to have. You can go to the next slide, please, Pete. You can read that. Gosh dang, my eyes are getting so old. I must be getting old. But anyway, we'll have baby back ribs, pulled pork, mac and cheese, coleslaw, beans, beverage, and then we'll have some Valentine cupcakes. It is $20 per person. You need to buy tickets so we can have a head count for the caterer. And the tickets you need to purchase them by this Friday. It's kind of a last minute, but we encourage you to please come out and support the parks and get a good meal out of it. And have a nice lunch, have a nice Valentine lunch, and then go home and tell your wife that, or your husband that you're not hungry, you had a great lunch, and then you can deal with the consequences from there. Or invite them to come meet you for lunch. So. And then this is some of the regular scheduled duties that we're just kind of continuing to do. Oh, yes.
Where can you purchase the tickets?
At City Hall. Thank you for asking. So at City Hall, Mary's team is graciously has the tickets at the front counter for us, and she's tracking it. She'll give you a ticket when you get there.
Are kids allowed?
Thank you for asking.
Kids go?
Pardon?
Is there a different rate for kids, or is it $20?
No, but we can work something out. Probably they'd get one rib to suck on a piece. Yeah, if you let me know that you have some kids that want to go, we can figure something out with cater. Absolutely.
Okay.
I'll make it happen. I'll make it happen. So we're continuing to do our scheduled duties, backing out valve boxes. You guys can read that. I don't have to go over it, but just basic what we do every day: water shutoffs, park maintenance. I'm trying to just go through there. I can't even read. I need to get up and go closer. I didn't even make that big enough so I can read what I wrote up there, but I did really write it. We had a sewer leak and we had a water leak. Also, we're keeping up with our backflow prevention program right now. And right now we're in the process of the recertification of the guys who do the backflow testing and the right-of-way permits, just the daily stuff. I just wanted to give you, that's kind of what we do on a regular basis. And then the next screen, hopefully the font's larger. Oh, good.
Smaller.
Yeah. we're doing our valve turning. And then we have an RFP that went out for our 500,000 gallon tank. We had the leak. So we have an RFP that went out for that, and that's due back in February to regrout, or it's not regrout, it's actually recaulking the bottom of the tank. It's a concrete tank. And then we have our water filter restoration, phase 1. Remember, we have 3 filters up there, so that RFP went out. So we have that going on. That's due back on February 19th. And then, what's the next one say there, Pete? I applied for a grant for the community center because as I showed you, that needs a new roof and some siding, so I applied for a grant for some of that. Preparing for hot summer nights with our themes again. We already have a couple sponsors that came to us, and we have bands that are coming out of the woodwork wanting to play there, so I'm kind of excited about it. And then Westcott, we're right now locating the gas line because we're going to be doing some boring underneath the tracks, and then you'll see a geotechnical company out there doing boring for both Davidson and Westcott Avenue, so we can do that water line crossing. TIB, Gorg Overlay, will be hiring out some professional services for that. And I have an RFP. I've had this RFP sitting in my desk about 80% complete for about a year now, maybe half a year. Anyway, so I'll finish that up and get that out. We have the Scott Hill Park and Old Pacific Highway utility tie-in that's going on. So our contractor actually has mobilized and they're working on that. Scott Hill Booster Station, we have AES that was hired for that. They plan on being done by August 25th. I'm hoping it's going to be sooner, but that means we'll have our booster station by then. And then we are in the process tomorrow. You'll see the flags go up for Valentine's Day and the pink lights go around downtown on the light poles. And then the last thing is, what's it say? Moving records. So we're helping, we're not really helping Mary's group. Mary's doing this for the city as a whole. As the city as a whole, we're helping move the records and boxes as her group goes through them for the city. So that's kind of what's going on. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hot summer nights, do you have a price yet?
It's going to be the same as last year.
Wasn't that 3?
So there's 3 different tier pricing. If you're, we're looking for the $1,500 sponsor.
Yeah, well, how about sponsoring a movie?
$350, I think it was $350, and then $500, and then $1,500. $1,500 does advertising for the whole weekend, for the whole summer series, excuse me, not weekend, summer series. $500 is the movie, and then $350, or $500 was a band, I think, and $350 was a movie.
Movies.
I remember on top of my head.
Do you have a schedule of what movies you're going to have yet?
We just started with the themes, and so I haven't picked the movies out with the themes yet. And if you have a particular movie that you'd like to see, it has to be family friendly, PG, then we can go from there.
All right. And well, when you get all that information ready, could you please forward it to Denise over at the chamber office?
Yes, I will, Denise. You got it. Okay.
Because we did sponsor one last year.
Yeah, that's all I got.
Oh,
Oh,
Sorry.
no, go ahead. I'll wait till the next turn.
No, I'm joking. Go ahead.
No, that's it.
I just had a question regarding the community building.
can you send it?
So, did it just, because it sits vacant for so long, is that kind of what added to rot in the floor and?
No,
It's old.
it's just you have to do regular maintenance. There, when you walk into the door, in the main area, the door sill had rotted out, and it just hadn't been maintained, so it continued to rot away at the front of the door. So it just is regular maintenance of the building that we haven't had the funding to maintain our facilities. So, the siding is part of it's rotten. And it's not that it's sitting vacant, it's just the funding not to be able to maintain it, because the building can sit vacant as long as you maintain the structure. So it's just the fact that we didn't have the funding to put into the exterior of the building, to re-roof it. We don't have the funds for that right now. We didn't have funds to go in and do some of the preventive maintenance that needed to be done, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
I spent like 6 days there one winter, and it didn't smell funky, and
I'm telling you what, it smelled funky when I went in there.
maybe somebody needs to air it out once in a while, maybe.
Yeah, well, part of the problem is what's underneath the building.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. So I think I know for a fact that we had a rat problem in the past, about 5 or 6 years ago. And it appeared that there were some raccoon droppings or possum droppings underneath the building. So you really can't prevent that unless you hire a service to come out and put traps in. It's right in the park area.
Right.
Or you put bait out, so, yeah. It's a little difficult.
Well, you did awesome. It looks
Yeah, well,
amazing.
no, the guys did awesome. Our
Wow.
guys did a really good job, so, yeah, they did a good job. I don't think they doubted themselves, whether they could do it, and I said, you can do it, because we don't have any funds, so you're going to have to do it.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Councilmember Frederick?
Miss Graham wants to.
Sorry.
Yeah, I just have a compliment to the crew and to Tracy. I'm in there every Tuesday morning for all the mornings, so it's very nice to go in there, and it looks very nice. The ladies were very impressed that all they had to do was touch their finger and the shades went up.
Yep.
Let me tell you, coolest thing you ever saw.
Yeah, miracle
Anyway.
workers.
But I don't know if there's anything that can be done, but when you go in, the front door does stick a little bit. It doesn't go open all
Well,
the way.
so
So I
that's-
didn't know if that, because the floor is kind of
That's
funky
exactly
there.
the reason why.
If there was anything else that,
No, we would have had to
Okay.
cut out
Yeah, okay.
probably an additional 5 feet going forward and redo the floor, and so unfortunately, we don't even have a place to be able to put that mat in there. And
Yeah.
when I think about it, I thought, I should have cut the other 5 feet back, but,
Wow.
yeah, the door sticks if the mat's there. If you move the mat out of the way, the door doesn't stick, so.
well, I
no
don't
mat.
know. I can report that to 40 ladies in the morning, so that they
Yeah.
don't all sit there and say how we need to fix it.
Yeah.
So, that's,
Hey,
that's
tell
all.
them to come see me, and I'll show them the presentation of what we did.
Oh, okay. I'll invite you over.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, your group's doing a great job. They
Yeah.
continue to amaze. So nice work there on the community center. My question is have we had a walkthrough yet with the Department of Transportation as far as Lewis River Road and them not maintaining adequate signage? And I'm talking specifically about where it goes from 2 lanes to 1 on Lewis River Road in front of the Shell station, would be Tax Place Liquor Store, Luckman's Coffee.
Yes, so.
I saw 2 near misses this weekend, and I'm just waiting for the
You've brought
person
that
to
up in the
just,
past.
just boom, right into the,
Yeah, you brought that up in the past, and I did bring that to Rick Kinniston, who is the traffic engineer for our area, and Rick is looking into that, as
Okay.
well as I've brought up some striping on Atlantic, because we see people using it as 2 lanes all
Yes.
the way together the freeway, so we brought that up, and some bicycle lane striping on Atlantic as well, because it's wide enough.
Yep.
So we're talking about putting in some additional signage with WashDOT. I've worked with talked with WashDOT on that, for the signage goes for the speed limit sign, striping the road on Atlantic, bike lane on Atlantic, the area right there in front of Luckman's Coffee where it goes from 2 to 1, that you're coming from the stoplight there. Also, heading out, I've been talking to him about grant too, so Rick and I are working on it. It's just kind of slow moving, but yes, we're
Okay.
aware of that.
I wasn't aware that the Atlantic issue was an issue until I went on a ride-along with the police department, and I'm like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
and they're like, yeah, this happens all the time.
Yeah,
I'm
it
like,
does.
Really? And then
It happens all the time when I drive to work with
Yeah. I was getting passed a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be there.
Yeah, or they drive parallel because they think it's 2 lanes, and I'm like,
Yeah,
"You're
that's
not seeing
exactly
the
what they're-
yellow
that's
stripe in the
exactly
road,
what
it's
they're
not
doing.
white, it's yellow, so.
Yep, for
A lot of
sure.
people don't
Okay.
mention that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any more questions? Okay, well, thank you very much. Move on to reports of advisory committees. Chamber of Commerce, Councilmember Graham.
Well, you heard what Denise had spoke about earlier. The only thing that I have what's on here is to add to that Craig and Robin Chilton were our Citizens of the Year. Tina Caton from USNR is the Employee of the Year. And Mike Schultz from Schultz Photographer is the Business of the Year. And we were able to surprise all 3 recipients this year, and it was a lot of fun. So, and then our open house at the Chamber office, I really want to stress that I would really like to see everybody come and meet the board and know who's sitting on front for the businesses. Come and, if you, I'm sure there's a lot of people that have not ever been into our visitor center. And we have gifts, we have information galore for everybody. So come down on the 20th and take a run through and talk to some of our people.
That's February 20th.
Yes.
At what time again?
5.
5 p.m.? Okay.
And that's about it that's it on my part and what Denise spoke of earlier.
Okay. And then the Council of Wahkiakum, I'm not even going to bother trying. Wahkiakum Council of Governments, is that?
I've not been to a meeting yet. They had one
Okay.
last week, which I was supposed to be gone, but I was sick, so I have not met with Mr. Fashing to talk about that. So I think we're going to meet maybe Friday.
Okay.
I did attend that meeting, and just a few presentations, nothing major to report.
Okay. And then the AWC legislation, I don't know, is anybody on that one?
Well, that's the mayor, but I think the only thing to report is
Okay.
City Action Days, which we discussed.
Okay. I'm sure he'll talk about it next meeting. Downtown Woodland revitalization?
Well, I'm sorry, I missed the meeting, and unless they want to change this, I cannot do a Tuesday at all to meet with them, so I don't know if really quite what to do about that yet. I just can't do Tuesday, so is Ms. Coleman, are you downtown revitalization?
Yeah.
Are they specific going to need just Tuesdays?
For the next one, I think, which is February 11th,
It's a Tuesday.
Yeah, we'll meet there, but it doesn't have to meet, we don't have to meet on Tuesday. We can meet another time, and that's what you brought up at the last council
Well,
meeting.
yeah, I know I'd asked you that.
Yeah, we'll bring that up at this next meeting.
Okay.
So you guys are meeting on February 11th? Did you go to the last one? Do we want,
Yeah, I go to all of them, as the president.
anything to report on it?
No.
Okay.
I reported at the last council, and now I can't remember what it was.
I'm just going
I've
off of the
slept
list.
since then.
It's on the list?
Yeah. Actually, I think they had agreed to purchase get the baskets, flower baskets again. And they're also looking at expanding downtown, the formal downtown for revitalization, so we can extend it out towards exit 2021. So we're looking at that. We're also sending out our letters for business owners to be members because they hadn't had any revenue that had come in. So we're revamping the letters and sending them out to all the business owners to put in their $50 a year fee, so we can use those funds towards grants that we want to go for and some matching dollars. So,
Okay.
and I think they're going to be a sponsor of Hot Summer Nights again, as they did in the past, because they are the one who really started that Hot Summer Nights. So that's off the top of my head.
Nicely done. Okay. That's it for reports, unless anybody has anything else to add? Nope. Move on to consent items. So,
Move adoption of the consent items A, B, and C.
Second.
sorry. Councilmember Fredericks, motions to approve the consent items A, B, and C. And seconded by Councilmember Chapman. Take the vote.
Councilmember Holland?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Rounds?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
Councilmember Fredericks?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
And it passes. Move on to action items, correct? Okay. Okay, move on to the action items. Action item D, Clerk Treasurer, ordinance number 1453, interfund loan from 104th Street to 320 sidewalk. First and final reading.
Move adoption of ordinance number 1453, first and final reading.
Second.
Okay. So Councilmember Fredericks, motion to adopt ordinance 1453, seconded by Councilmember Rounds. Clerk, take the vote.
Discussion.
Oh, sorry, discussion? Any discussion?
Yeah, I just real quick, this is the $88,000 loan from Fund 104th Street to 320 for the CDBG sidewalk project, and this is just a loan to pay for that until the grant money is received and the street fund can be reimbursed. We've done this before. It is well within the city's ability to do this, and the Finance Committee made a recommendation to pass this with a do pass recommendation out of the Finance Committee this evening.
No comment.
Sounds like it was 60 to 90 days is the loan, roughly, is the assumption. Okay, any more discussion? Okay. Take the vote.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Rounds?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Holland?
Aye.
Councilmember Fredericks?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Ordinance number 1453 has passed. Move on to action item E. Ordinance number 1447, amending various sections of Woodland Municipal Code for code updates. Final reading.
Move adoption of ordinance number 1447.
Second.
Motion to approve ordinance, or, is that right? Motion to approve ordinance 1447 by Councilmember Frederick, seconded by Councilmember Plaza. Any discussion?
Just cleans up spelling errors and cross-reference errors and clarification of who's doing what. It's just a simple change.
Any further discussion?
No comment.
Okay. Would the clerk take the vote?
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Fredericks?
Aye.
Councilmember Holland?
Aye.
Councilmember Rounds?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye. Ordinance number 1447 is passed. Move on to action item F. Ordinance number 1448, amending Chapter 17 of the Woodland Municipal Code relating to code enforcement, final reading. Any motion to,
Move to approve action item F, ordinance number 1448.
Second.
motion to approve by Councilmember Plaza, seconded by Councilmember Chapman. Any discussion?
Just basically like the last ordinance, it's just an update and a little cleaning up that needs to be done.
Yeah, I concur. It's just streamlining everything, making it more simple this year.
Any further discussion? Clerk, take the vote.
Councilmember Holland?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Rounds?
Aye.
Councilmember Fredericks?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
Ordinance number 1448 has passed. Move to action item G, authorize the mayor to sign engineering service agreement amendment number 1 with Wallace Engineering for the Headworks screen replacement job. Can I have a motion?
Move adoption of ordinance, or no ordinance, move adoption to, correction.
Authorize the mayor.
Move to authorize the mayor to sign engineering service agreement amendment number 1 with Wallace Engineering for the Headworks screen replacement job.
I'll second.
Easy for me to say.
Motion to approve, Councilmember Fredericks, seconded by Councilmember Rounds. Any discussion?
So there is a cost associated with this, correct? Because it says 0. So it's not, there's no cost?
It's basically a term amendment because the contract expired in December.
Okay.
Because we hired them to do the engineering on this, and the project wasn't going to go through this year, so we're just extending their contract term.
Got it.
Their contract is a not to exceed lump sum.
Got it, okay, thank you.
It did look like fees went up though on, is that?
Yes, but their contract is a not to exceed, so
Okay.
it doesn't affect us.
Okay, perfect. Any further discussion? Clerk, take the vote.
Councilmember Holland?
Aye.
Councilmember Plaza?
Aye.
Councilmember Fredericks?
Aye.
Councilmember Chapman?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith?
Aye.
Councilmember Rounds?
Aye.
Councilmember Graham?
Aye.
Sorry. Authorizing the mayor to sign engineering service agreement number 1 has passed. And that does it for all the action items. Move on to,
Do you want to take a
Can we
break?
take a 10-minute recess?
boy, you guys are needy.
Yes, we are.
Okay, we will take a 10-minute break before we move into workshop.
Yeah. You have hors d'oeuvres?
Yeah, I wish.
Awesome.
In my car.
Reconvene at 8:27.
On the road for
Because
locates, call
they're
for
little
locates.
things I'm like, what are they?
No, it's usually, it's just the spots where we put the locates.
Oh, okay, all righty. Just checking.
So it is 8:26. Well, seems like everybody's ready to go to get the meeting going. So we are now moving into workshop, and we are going to discuss the annexation to the fire district. I'm not entirely sure.
Actually, Chief Nora
Chief Nora,
is going to start, and then I'll come in behind.
Okay, presentation by Chief North.
Anyway, just a brief handout that I'll work through. So we talk about a few
Thank you.
the folks on the Public Safety Committee. It's going to look very familiar.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So, generally speaking, municipalities are responsible to provide fire service to their city. They can do it through 3 ways. They can have their own fire department, they can contract with another agency for fire, and usually it's a nearby special district, though they can contract with another city if they had another city that immediately abutted them, or they annex into a fire district for that service. There's been a real push across the state. I have a list of 14 different annexations or mergers that have taken place across the state since 2017. So there's a big push because cities are recognizing the cost of fire service, and when you're trying to provide that service, so sometimes in a small geographic area, it's easier to share that load with your neighbors once in a while, and you can cover that geographic area better and get a higher level of service. So, for example, at CCFR, we have the city of La Center and the city of Ridgefield annexed into the district. They annexed in the early 1990s, according to former Fire Chief Larry Bartell, though he couldn't remember the exact date, and I could not find it in Clark County records anywhere with that. So those cities have been annexed in. Kalama is annexed into Fire District 5, Cowlitz 5. Kelso is annexed into Cowlitz Fire District 2. So it's pretty common way of doing business. And you've probably seen a lot in the news and paper and in some of the other print this last few months. The city of Battleground is considering an annexation into Fire District 3, which has traditionally served the Hawkinson and Brush Prairie areas. So it's something that cities take into consideration quite a bit. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the advantages for that, and that's part of the handout that I have there for you. So as a special district, we are governed by an elected board of commissioners. In fact, I should introduce, I have our chair, Stanley Chun, he's an elected commissioner for our district and elected by his peers to be the chair. I also have Chief Jackson's back in town, so got Mike Jackson with us. And then we also have the crew, the on-duty crew, Captain Doman and Firefighter Ferber from Fire Station 29 is here tonight. But so we're governed by a 5-member board of commissioners. And a board can have either 3 commissioners, 5 commissioners, or 7. So by an election of the board, they can actually raise their numbers to 7 commissioners. And so when you get to areas that are, really looking at a large geographic area or a large population area, it's not uncommon to see them bump up to a larger board of commissioners. So that's our governance structure. The board hires the fire chief, and then the fire chief administers the day-to-day business of the fire district. So in the district, we have 3 chief officers, one Chief Jackson in charge of community risk reduction and fire prevention for all of the cities in the district, Chief Peeler's in charge of operations, and Chief Yeager's in charge of administration and logistics. So that's kind of the way it helps me administer the district. And then we have 5 stations staffed each day with a minimum of 2 personnel. As we're able to, with as I've told you many times in here before, like the Woodland Station, we oftentimes have a 3rd person on here. And then we have volunteers that augment our crews, as well as some interns that augment our crews. So one of the advantages of annexing into the district is the residents of the city would pay the levy rate that the fire district pays. So the fire district's levy rate never exceeds $1.50 per thousand. That is our maximum legal levy rate. We could go to the voters for an additional operations levy. I don't know anybody in this area that does that. I know of some departments in the state have done it over time. We don't do that here. Some departments have an EMS levy to provide ambulance transport or some other things also, and I can talk about that later. But so in 2017, we went to the voters of the district and asked for our rate. At that time, it had dropped to about $1.32 a thousand. So can we return it to $1.50 a thousand? So for 6 years, we can collect $1.50 a thousand. And then, once again, as valuations exceed the state 1% growth maximum, our rate will start to drop again. So the contract that we have with the city is that the city pays $1.50 per thousand for the life of the contract. But in the district, the rate actually can vary. It can drop down, and by the vote of the people, we go to the people and say, we'd like to return to $1.50 a thousand, or maybe we don't need $1.50 a thousand. We've dropped to $1.35, and we say, we can do it on $1.45 a thousand. We ask for a vote of the people, it goes back to $1.45. But so right now, the citizens pay the contract rate. The city pays a contract rate of $1.50 a thousand. So it would allow you the rate for the citizens to fluctuate the same as the rest of the district out there. The city is no longer responsible for the provision of fire protection services and any associated costs. So we did a good job with the long-term contract of trying to relieve you of most of the costs. So an example would be in Battleground, they pay for their own fire engine, they pay for their own fire station. And so when they pay District 3, this is prior to them wanting to annex in, when they were paying District 3, they're only paying for the personnel to be in the station, and that they pay for the rigs and maintenance on the station and things of that nature. So once you're part of the district's responsible for all those things, buying the rigs, building the stations, all the personnel, all the associated costs with that. The city really has no fire department associated costs any longer. It allows us to do some improved forecasting, long-range planning. So it allows us to more easily move staff and equipment around to meet the demands of the district. As I mentioned to you last meeting, Woodland, for its relatively small population, has a pretty high run volume, a pretty high incident volume. And so I can see a point as population grows and incident volume grows that you get to a point where one unit isn't enough to do it. So being annexed in, we could look at the overall picture of the district and say, is there time to put 2 units at this location or move some things around, move some people around to cover the whole district as opposed to just one little place there. If I had to come to you and say, hey, you're getting too busy for the one unit that's there, we need to put another one in, that's a big hit just for the city. But if we share the load with all the other residents, that helps out. It also provides some equity and consistency in funding and resource allocation. And really what I'm getting at there is everybody pays the same, and what we strive to is make sure that everybody's getting the same level of service out there. One of the things, and I spoke about an EMS levy previously, but one of the things I've considered for the fire district is seeing what the residents feel like about an EMS levy for funding our own ambulance service. AMR is the contract service provider, and they are allowed 18 minutes to get here on calls to the whole north end of Clark County and to this part of Woodland. They get 18 minutes on calls, even if they're critical calls. Just yesterday evening, the same crew that's on tonight, there was a pedestrian that was struck on Lakeshore Drive, just outside the city limits, but within our response area, the Clark County portion of the response area. And so we wait for the ambulance to come from deep in Clark County to get up here and help out, and that patient was critical. Captain Dome was also a paramedic who rode to the hospital and with them to help provide care. And one of the points that also helps with there, though, and I pointed this out to you before, but we had 2 units here for that, the La Center unit and the Woodland unit, and because we're more likely to get another call in Woodland before we get a call in La Center, the La Center unit moved to Woodland while the battalion chief went and picked up Captain Doman from the hospital, brought him back here, get the Woodland unit back in service. But if we were to have an EMS levy in the district, the city wouldn't be a part of that EMS levy, and the city wouldn't be part of that service, or you would have to come up with, within the city council, would have to come up with additional funding to match that funding there. So as part of the district, the citizens would vote, they get a vote on it. If they want it, it passes district-wide, we get the service. If they don't, then we don't get the service, but the citizens of Woodland would be voting on that. It helps us look at some long-term capital asset needs. I'd like to be able to complete the fire station. It's partially built at this time, and so it would allow us to look at some funding sources to fully complete out the station. We will be building a station in Ridgefield. We've sold the downtown Ridgefield fire station, and when I was here last time, I said it's going up for sale. It sold pretty quickly, and so we'll need to build a station on Hillhurst, but by having the city annexed into the district, we could look at talking to all the district residents and saying, hey, look, here's where we need to put some of our resources and our funding to finish out these stations here. And then it just helps us plan on future needs, so as populations change throughout the district, we start looking about where we need the services at. The maximum, and I had it in here, but I'll let Pete talk about the maximum city property tax levy. The state sets it as if a city annexes into a district, your maximum levy is $360 minus the cost of the district and a library district. So, any questions on what I feel are the advantages of being annexed into the district?
So this might be a financial question, but the question that I have is, what is the cost to the taxpayer? And not maybe necessarily the first year, which would stay the same, but future years. So if I have a $200,000 home, is it that's the part that I'm having a difficult time with. Does the taxpayer see an increase in their taxes to pay for this? Any different than they would if they received the state, which we, I think, normally approve, the 1% that we approve, which doesn't ironically cover the cost of our contract.
Correct.
Increases year over year. So can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like there's some additional costs that we don't know about.
We are limited to the same 1% increase per year unless there's a vote of the people to allow it to go higher. So the vote of the citizens in the district in 2017 let it be 106% each year for 6 years, and then it goes back to 101% based on valuation increases. So being in the district, if the citizens were annexed into the district, they're subject to that same 1%, or it would be whatever the remaining years are on that levy that we have, and then it goes back to the 1%. You ask about what's the increase to the taxpayer. Generally speaking, the cities, usually when cities merging in, they make an agreement with their citizens to lower the amount of taxes they're going to take. So it's not necessarily a great deal for the citizens if you were to say, annex into the district, pay them $1.50 a thousand, and we'd like you to still pay us $2.46 a thousand. So that doesn't work very well, and that's some of the resistance that Battleground's running into right now, because their levy, I believe, is only $1.37 a thousand, and they pay $1.35 a thousand to the district, and so they want to keep that levy, and so they're reducing some of their utility fees and some other things.
So in essence, then, I don't mean to cut you off. In essence, if we're reducing by $1.50 on the city side, reducing it on the city side and increasing the district to $1.50, the net cost is zero.
Yes. The net cost is theoretically zero, and in fact could be less because the district could start dropping off in what we're collecting. We may, because we then become assessed district-wide, and so it could be that we start dropping to, we're $1.48 this year, we were $1.44 last year. So what happened last year is that some valuations in some portions of the district did not go up very much, and so for us, we could still collect a certain amount, so that means everybody paid $1.48. We actually envision that this will start dropping off again as valuations go up, because there's a maximum we can collect. So in that way, it actually is a potential, and actually I believe would be a real savings for the citizens, as opposed to staying at $1.50 all the time,
Sure.
even where ours is floating up and down.
Remind me how many commissioners you have for the district? And
5.
What is the total population served?
42,000, including, so our total population served, 42,000 includes the city of Woodland. So if you back that out, 36,000.
Okay.
So a lot of the things that were measured against is what's your total population.
And these are all at-large positions?
They're at large throughout the district. One from Ridgefield, 2 of the 5 are from, they have Woodland addresses, but they're right across the river. 2 from the city of Ridgefield, and 1 from Louisville Park area.
So, if I'm not mistaken, then this is 2 policy questions that are being asked. One, we're asking the city council to say, hey, do you want us to take this to the voters to ask to be annexed? And the second part of that question is what will the overall rate be? Whether are we gonna, is it $1.50 now? Are we gonna decrease it, the city's take by $1.50? Are we gonna maybe say, well, we're gonna decrease it by $1.45 and you're gonna pay a nickel per assessed value, or whatever that number is? Those are really the 2 policy questions that we're trying to get to at the end. Is
Correct.
that?
Correct.
Then that's it? Okay.
And the process would be, you would do an ordinance requesting annexation to the district. Our Board of Commissioners would pass a resolution accepting your request and wanting, concurring with the proposed annexation. It goes to the county council, and so it'll go to the county commissioners in Cowlitz County as well as the county council in Clark County to approve. They would really have no reason not to approve that. Then it's an election held, and it just has to be 50% plus one in the city and 50% plus one in the district. So the voters of the district vote to say whether or not to allow Woodland annex, and the city votes to say whether or not we want to annex. And then it would become effective, if it were to pass, it would become effective January 1, 2022. The dates I threw out to you in there was to look at the August primary. I think that and there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that there'll be a lot of things on the ballot, and that reduces your costs. I heard you mention today that you had a vote and you had to pay a certain cost to Cowlitz County on that. So with a lot of folks in the primary election, a lot of issues out there, everybody pays a small share. If we were to run that in, say, for example, in a February vote, like Battleground and Fire District 3 are doing, they're sharing that with just a couple school districts, so their cost on that election is going to be pretty high. If we were to go with the August 4th, 2020 election, because of some deadlines, the deadline to get the information in is May 8th for the counties, for the state elections. And so we would need an ordinance from the city in either your April 6th meeting or no later than your April 20th meeting. Our Board of Commissioners would have to concur at the April 9th, no later than April 23rd. But I would want to start a public education campaign immediately at that point and have about a 16-week campaign of getting information out to the voters so they understand what they're looking at. Pete has information on the money part. He did the breakdown on the cost to the city. Any questions for me on the policy or process?
Any other questions for Chief? No?
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boyce?
Excuse me. Okay. I handed out a little bit of information earlier. Titled Fire District Annexation Analysis is the first page. I want to just give you a sense of what options I looked at first, and then go into some financial numbers, both historic and looking into the future 5 years. And then the last page will be talking about what the impact is. Now, when looking at these numbers, there are certain assumptions you have to make. So while I go through this, I'll be talking about the assumptions I made forecasting-wise. And while I outlined 3 options, we could look at this a number of different ways. So keep that in mind while we're talking through these. Option 1 is do not annex into Clark County Fire and Rescue District. The fire contract expense has been outpacing our revenue. That's one of the reasons why we're looking at this. And in subsequent pages, you'll see that happening. Option 2, annex into the district, and to try to make this revenue neutral, especially the first year. We're talking about reducing a portion of the property tax and eliminating the public utility tax. So instead of just looking at this property tax-wise, looking also at the public utility tax. One of the concerns with reducing too much of the property tax, it's kind of a stable revenue source for the most part, as stable as we have. We'd be relying a lot on sales tax, and as you know, that can fluctuate greatly with the economy. I've got some historical numbers on that too, we'll show you. The third option is to annex into the district and just reduce property tax. In the amount of the reduction, I'm looking to reduce, basically I looked at the dollar amount of the contract, what we're paying in 2020, and offset that by the amount of property tax. So those are the 3 options we're looking at. The second page, this is just so you have an idea of where we sit revenue-wise. This is a chart that shows how much in property tax we've received since 2008 through projected into 2020, and sales tax. So the orange line is the sales tax, the blue line is the property tax. And again, you can see the property tax is a fairly steady and stable revenue source. Sales tax can fluctuate, and you see that in this graph. The next page I'm laying out the three options again, projecting into the future 5 years. So this is assuming, because we have a pretty good 2020 projection, I'm acting like this transition is happening in 2020. We all know it will happen in subsequent years if approved by the voters. But it gives you a sense of what can happen. So option one, that's the option where we don't annex. You can see the amount of property tax we receive in 2020, 1.571 million. Option two, that property tax would be reduced to 945,000. And remember, again, in option two, we offset that amount with reducing the public utility tax. We'll see that in a later slide. And option three would be a full reduction in property tax. The city would be bringing in $280,000 in property tax is all. You can see the graph showing graphically that information we talked about above. I'm making some assumptions in the projection of the property tax that there will be a net 2% increase year after year. We're allowed the 1% increase, but we also get new construction. Looking historically, it's varied over time. So I'm trying to be conservative on the revenue numbers and a little bit more liberal on the expenditures. At the bottom of the page, you see the amounts collected again, but at the far right of that, you see what the rate would be, the property tax rate. So right now we're at $1.84. Option two would take it down to $1.18. Again, that's with reducing public utility tax also. Option three would bring it all the way down to 33 cents. The next slide just shows projections of sales tax moving into the future. Again, projecting a 2% increase. It has fluctuated more over in the past. There have been some increases as high as 9% year over year, but again, trying to be conservative. So you can see in 2020 we're projecting about 1.6 million. By 2025 with that 2% increase up to 1.79. The next page shows the historical expense related to fire service. We went back to 2008, and this spans when we started contracting with Clark County Fire and Rescue. So you can see the changes over time in what the city has been paying. So 2020, we're in the neighborhood of 1.29 million. And if anyone has questions as we go through, please jump in.
District 2 dropped off and they weren't cleaned.
All right. The next slide. This one's hard to project, and what I'm trying to project is the future contract price for fire services. moving forward. Like I said at the beginning, I was trying to be a little more conservative with the revenue numbers, a little more liberal with the expenditures. So here, I'm estimating an annual increase of 7%, maybe a little high, but again, looking at that history in the previous slide, it's hard to predict what assessed value is going to do in the future. So you can see 2020, we're looking at 1.29 million, looking at that 7% increase until 2025, 1.8 million. And the final slide looks at the three options and what impact it could have on the city. So option number one, again, is no annexation. You can see the first year, this is what we're projecting in our current budget. The top three items are all revenue related. So you have the property tax. Again, that's being projected at 2% increase per year. The public utility tax, this year we're planning on, or we're hoping to receive $664,000 in public utility tax. I've got a projection of a 3% increase on that year after year. But again, that depends on what happens with our utility rate study. So I'm trying to be conservative with that. Other revenue, all other revenue associated is $4.7 million right now. And again, projecting a 3% increase year over year on the other revenue. The next line down, well, you see the totals. Then the next line down, it says general park, street with fire. And what that is meant to represent is the general fund, the park fund, and the street fund. And because we're in option number one, we're still including the fire contract. I've predicted these expenses will increase 3% per year. So you can see what happens with that across the 5-year time span. And the final line, revenue less expenditure, you can see where the city would net out comparatively. Now, in the future years, you're seeing negative items. If that happens, we'll have to alter city expenditures or augment revenue in some fashion to account for that. Option number two, again, that's to annex into the district, eliminate the public utility tax, and reduce the property tax. So again, we'd reduce the property tax down to $945,000. We project that out with 2% increases year over year. The public utility tax is eliminated.
Can I ask a clarifying question on
Sure.
that? When you say eliminated altogether or just by 3%?
This is eliminated altogether. The 3%, I was projecting in option one, a 3% increase year after year. Option two, there is no longer a public utility tax.
And can you remind us all what our percentage of utility tax is currently?
It is 12%.
And
12.5%.
do you off the top of your head know what Battlegrounds is, just to give a comparison?
We think it's 18.
Yeah, it's up there.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. So that's why you see zeros across the board for the public utility tax. That would no longer be there. You know, the benefit to that for citizens is every 2 months when they receive their utility bill, they'd see that savings right away as compared to on their property tax bill. You can argue that it gives city council some flexibility because we are becoming, if we go with this option, we're becoming more reliant on sales tax revenue. You know, if another Great Recession happens, council could, if they deemed fit, alter the public utility tax to help offset that deficit. And of course, there are other options to look at too, not just the public utility tax. The other revenue, we show at 4.7 million, and again, I show that increasing 3% a year over time. The expenditure side, the general fund, park fund, street fund, backing out the amount of the fire contract comes in at 5.6 million. Again, the first year, revenue less expenditures, we end up with 45,688. Again, we're trying to be cost neutral, so we're backing out the exact cost of the contract in 2020 and reducing revenue by that same amount. Moving forward, you can see in 2021, 22, 23 through 2025, we don't go into a deficit situation. Again, we're talking about some assumptions. They can change. Reality can be a little bit different, so we all need to keep that in mind. Option number 3, if I can get this to scroll. There we go. Option number 3 is to only reduce property tax by the amount of the contract. So again, property tax would be taken down to $280,900. We project 2% increases over time. So you can see in 2025 that brings it to 310. So not much change there. Public utility tax would stay. So you see the annual increase of 3% over time. The other revenue, 4.7 million in 2020, 3% increase over time to 5.5 million. The expenditure for the general fund, park fund, street fund without the fire contract, again, is the 5.6 million in 2020. Looking at 3% increases over time, and you can see the revenue less expenditure, the change over time. It looks a little bit better, and mostly that's due to the public utility tax increase over time. So those are the numbers we've put together thus far. As far as impact to the individual taxpayer, you know, we can pick a number like a $200,000 home and make that calculation also. Unfortunately, I don't have it this evening. But with that, I want to take questions, talk about the different options, or if you have other ideas of how to approach this, I'm all ears.
Any questions?
Yes.
You can go ahead if you want.
I actually get excited when someone else raises their hand.
Councilmember
Well,
Warren.
mine actually goes back to previous, I think it was last month or earlier this week, whenever we got the rundown of all of the calls for service. And so if I remember correctly, the bulk of what you guys do are not fires, they're emergency services, correct?
Yes.
So you mentioned EMS service. So what would, if we were to annex into the district, what would that look like? That's not something you already have, right? Anywhere? Like having a specific emergency medical service for Woodland, because that seems to be the bulk of what you go, the type of calls you respond to, right?
So you would not see a change in the service here. For the most part, it's how it's paid for. So it's taken it from a pass-through of the city, or a large pass-through of the city. The citizens essentially pay us, and then they pay the city for the rest of the city's services. So for us to change, like our ambulance services, some of those other things, that's an additional service, and I'd be coming back to the citizens of the entire district at some point to say, hey, look, do we still want to be in a contract with a private provider that bills at this rate
Right.
and takes 18 minutes, or would we like to have an ambulance right here in our community? And citizens pay a portion of that with property taxes, or taxes, and so they don't get a bill. For example, North Country EMS in Yackle, if you're a citizen there, you pay for that with your property tax, and then you don't get a bill.
Right.
They bill your insurance company and recover a portion of that. Citizens don't get it. So I'm not sure if I'm answering the question there, but I think in the annexation scenario, you're not going to see a significant change in any of the way we do business right now.
Right. But would we have, currently, you're under contract with the ambulance company.
Correct.
So nobody's just getting specific.
Correct.
Okay, that was kind of my thought.
Clark County Fire and Rescue holds an ambulance license. We could transport if we want. At this point, we're in a 5-year contract with AMR, piggybacked through Clark County. The city of Vancouver holds that contract, and so Clark County and the cities in Clark County, as well as the city of Woodland, by virtue of your contract with us, we're piggybacked on that contract. The county piggybacks on the city contract. So we still have a few more years of that. But as that contract winds out in 2024, I think we as a community all need to look at it and say, is that the service we want, or do we want to be looking at some other form of ambulance service?
It may be worth mentioning, I think that's a good example of how partnering with our neighbors can improve things. The AMR contract, albeit none of us are excited about waiting 18 minutes for an ambulance, we're in that contract because this fire service area is consistent with the rest of Clark County Fire and Rescue. Prior to the contract for service with Clark County, we tried to pursue a contract with AMR and we could not get them to commit a contract at all. So literally, they served us out of convenience. They had an operation with a contract in Vancouver and an operation in Longview with a contract. Both of those had contracts, and they would pull vehicles to serve Woodland as they could. And prior to our consolidation, we kept seeing those response times creep up because they had no contractual commitment. So someone was going to have to wait. It would be someone in Woodland. They'd send their resources to the place that they had a contractual obligation. We saw response times routinely creeping up to 25, 30, 35, and on occasion 40, 45 minutes, which was part of our impetus to really look at a different way to do business. This got us to where we're at, which is far better than that, but I think that partnering idea with the fire district coming larger area gives us a lot more leverage to look at options, whether that's a better contract with AMR, or providing their own ambulance service, or whatever those different models look like. We're better positioned to do that with a kind of a broader base of service, if that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. I'm familiar with the model of it's part of your property tax where my dad lives. That's how they do things. Their entire fire and ambulance service is all upfront in their property tax.
It's actually, it's very prevalent throughout the state. There's just a couple of the more urbanized areas that have a private ambulance provider. Most areas, so that's, we kind of fall into that by being on the edge of Vancouver. So it's been a private contract here for many years, but most parts of the state, actually, the fire service provides the ambulance transport.
Well, it seems kind of silly to take a $500,000 truck to a man stop breathing, right? I mean, that's not really what you do, right?
If what they really need is an ambulance. We do, because we're close,
Okay.
So you don't want to not breathe for 18 minutes if
Right.
there's a resource 4 minutes down the road. But ideally, what that person needs is transport to a hospital for
Right.
definitive care.
Okay.
Thank you.
I appreciate you sharing the history on that. That was a major reason why we made that change, because we looked at our own, we looked at continuing to do what we were doing, and those response times were getting really, really long. And when you're in a heart attack situation, you don't want to be waiting 40 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. So, do we know the maximum, just out of curiosity, refresh my memory on the public utility tax. At some point, that requires voter approval to go once you're at a certain number, does it not require voter approval, or is it unlimited?
I believe it's unlimited.
Okay.
It's limited on like electric, natural gas, telephone at 6%.
Okay.
You can go above that with a vote, but the public utility tax on water, sewer, and garbage recycling is, I believe, unlimited.
Okay, so that's, I didn't understand. That's the part that I knew we had to, one of them, we had to go to the vote, the folks. Okay. So now that we're just looking at it here, what is the next step? Tell me where we go from here.
The next step is determining which option City Council wants to pursue, if any. Well, I guess option one is continue on the way they are. I think we should price out on a $200,000 home or $300,000 home what that impact is to individuals, so they can see that.
Is it okay to ask, excuse me, is it okay to ask what the verbiage would be proposed for both option 2, option 3, and what the verbiage would look like on a ballot?
Well, we haven't worked on that yet, so we can put that together. As you know, especially in option 2, where we're eliminating public utility tax, the city doesn't want to be boxed in and permanently do that. Like I said, in the case of a situation where the sales tax might tank and council is faced with, I'm sure eliminating expenditures would be the first thing we'd look at, but the public utility tax may need to be an option to offset that deficit for a short period of time or whatever council chooses. So with that language, we want to be able to have the ability to continue to manipulate the public utility tax if it's needed.
Don't we already have the ability to do that?
We do.
With option 3?
We do.
I was saying with option 3, we have the ability to reduce or increase it. It just seems to me that option 3 seems to be a lot cleaner.
It's easier to understand. There are less moving parts. It has the same net effect, and you would still have that option to manipulate the public utility tax because there isn't a cap on it.
Which would be up or down?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and even option 1, if we find it more difficult in the future to meet the fire contract, the public utility tax could be manipulated to help cover that cost.
And you might going to have $500, $600 water bills every other month.
Right, and yeah, that would be difficult.
Sure. Okay, so then the idea is that at some point you'd like the council to make a decision on 1, 2, or 3, and when are we looking at having to make that decision, and what does that look like?
Right. So in Chief Nor's report, we
April, he needs to have this back to his commissioners by April 6th, so I'm assuming it's either February or early March.
Correct.
It's at your April 6th meeting, you would adopt the resolution. So your decision, is prior to that, so that you come in to that meeting on the 6th, the resolution is adopted, ordinance is adopted, and then on the April 9th meeting, the board of commissioners they have a resolution.
Yeah.
And are you taking 2 readings?
Yeah, that's another question, because the public engagement portion of this is, the longer there is to have public engagement, the better. So
let me cut to the chase on this. Were you guys looking for a decision this evening?
No, it's a workshop.
I say, yeah, but we were looking for like, hey, do you want direction?
It would be nice to have direction so we could solidify
I'm
some
just
numbers.
I'm just trying to get you what you want, and I don't know if you're
So-
going to get it, but
Ideally, I would love to know if council would consider one of those three options. And that way we can shore up numbers and start moving forward.
well, I'm leaning towards option 3, so I'm providing you some clear direction in one seat.
No, 2 seats.
Well, I'm only one seat.
The only issue I've got, and I'm not a numbers guy, so take it for what it's worth, is while option 3 looks cleaner, I have never heard of a tax being lowered significantly after it's been raised. So I'm kind of leaning towards option 2 because it's easy, I can see us raising it, from 0, the public utility tax, up a little bit if we need to cover that. But I would also think, and again, I don't have the numbers, so I don't know, but being on an I-5 corridor, we get enough visitor traffic through here that I think that the sales tax would offset any money we would lose during a recession or a downturn from the citizens. So we would maybe keep an even keel. I don't know. Anyway, that's where I'm at. I'm an option 2
I don't
guy.
disagree with Mr. Plaza. The only thing that I'd like to see is, I want to know, from an ease of voter understanding, what's easier to understand, and how that's going to look in a voter's guide on what it's going to say and what the ballot's going to say. Because to me, I think option 2 gets a little bit more murkier than option 3. Option 3 requires if you want to increase the tax, you have to pass a voter approval on the increase in the property tax. And if you increase the public utility tax, it is a tax increase. You are required to have, I think, 2 readings of it. You give folks the option to come down and tell you, no, you need to, So I don't disagree, but I'm a little leery on what that language is going to look like in a voter's guide. And
Well, that's another thing that kind of concerns me with option 3 is because versus option 2, obviously option 1, we're dead in the water if we don't annex, right? If I'm reading these numbers and stuff right.
our costs are going to go up.
Right.
significantly.
So, annexation is it's got to be done. I think option 2 would be an easier sell to the citizens versus option 3, because they're going to see the public utility tax being gone with the passage of that. Am I correct?
Correct.
Right, versus...
Option 2.
There's still
Option
being
two.
right, option 2. Versus in option 3, the public utility tax is still there, and a majority, or maybe not a majority, a small vocal minority will see it as, well, this is just another way they're screwing us over, and they're making us pay for the annexation, but they're not giving us any relief anywhere else.
The only question that I would have on that, and I don't, again, my only question is I don't believe option 2 will even speak to the public utility tax. 'Cause we're not asking them about the utility tax. I don't
Right,
think in there you're going to be talking about decreasing the public utility tax.
But during the fire department's educational moments, when they go out and do their education to the public, that's something that I would assume that they could bring up. Right. So-
What I would like to know is, Pete, is this going to help the taxpayer, or is it going to not help the taxpayer? I don't think he heard me.
Mr. Boyce?
Repeat your question. I'm
Is
sorry.
this going to help the taxpayer or not help the taxpayer?
We're trying to make it as revenue neutral as possible. Fluctuations in assessed value after we would annex into the district would dictate exactly how much property tax they would pay to the district for that service. There could be cases where that rate goes down and it is a benefit, or they could be stuck at near that $1.50. So it's as close to revenue neutral as we can get.
So are they're not paying the $1.50 now, the taxpayers?
Well, you can argue they are because
Okay,
it's part
so
of the
they are.
general fund.
Okay,
And every year when that goes up, we have to find cuts elsewhere in the budget.
Right.
So it affects other
Right.
services the
Right.
general fund provides.
But, so they're paying that no matter.
Right. Well,
And
yeah.
it's-
Basically.
It's in a different pocket.
Right,
It's-
right.
They're still paying it, but
Instead
it's
of giving the
not.
money to the city,
It-
and then
It would
writing
go
it
directly
That's
to the
right.
those
district.
folks, it goes
Right.
directly to them, and there's representation. There will be, you want to run and serve on the board of the CCFR as a commissioner, you have the ability to do that. Today, if there's a problem with fire service, the citizens come to us and tell us their concerns, and then we relay that to those folks. This
Right.
provides direct representation
Right.
of those tax dollars.
There's one more important piece of information I forgot to mention. So in order to simplify this, I was not including the, I believe it's 67 cents per thousand with the levy lid lift. So I'm assuming, under all these options, that we'd still collect that. So all of those rates I quoted you would be increased by that 67 cents per thousand allocated to the police department for 3 officers and general police equipment. So,
Keep up with
but
that.
as soon as I started including that, we don't have apples to apples. It
Right.
gets confusing.
That makes
So,
sense.
Got a question on
just so you know
option,
that's out there.
option 3.
Mhm.
So it's reducing the property tax down. What's the
Right.
process of increasing that back up if city did need it at
Basically, it
that
would
point?
be like a levy lid lift.
It'd be another vote.
You would have to go to the people to increase that.
So we would not have to go to a voter on option 2
Well,
as far as the public utility?
Public utility tax, council can do that by adopting an ordinance. So,
Okay.
no, it wouldn't require a vote.
Even if we went with 3, correct?
Correct. So anytime you reduce or increase the public utility tax, it's just a vote at council adopting an ordinance.
I see
Going through
option
that
2 as
process.
like an immediate, people see a drop on their water bill, sewer bill,
Mhm.
which that's obviously a big complaint in this town of how much those bills are. I see that being an immediate drop that people see that might make it more palatable.
Well, and I think Councilmember Fredericks brings up a good issue, is that would that be on the ballot? When you're communicating with the public, you're telling them we're going to reduce the public utility tax. They look at the voter guide and don't see anything about it. That could be an issue.
But the
Yeah.
utility tax will stay the same unless council takes action to reduce it. And I'd be shocked if you're going to put something in the annexation language that includes any sort of language pertaining to the public utility tax. I don't know, I think it's a stretch including that. And that's why I think it's important to understand what the language looks like, that we would be, so that we have an understanding of what John Q. taxpayer's looking at when he gets his voter's guide in the mail, and he's sitting there trying to figure out how to vote. One of those options to me seems a little bit more murkier than the other option.
So I guess what I might propose now is for us to put together language on both option 2 and option 3 and let council take a look. I believe that's the consensus. Everyone's either saying 3 or 2 at this point. So let's do that, let you take a look. And is there any other information you'd like to see before a decision can be made?
If you could,
Yes.
sorry. If you could throw something together, like, a basic per 200,000, what option
Right.
2 is and what option 3 is on those two, that would give us kind of an idea of rough ballpark.
Okay.
Councilmember Holland?
I just have a question to clarify on the utility tax, and it's really late, and I'm trying to remember back, but the way I would understand this is if we were to create a new ordinance, it would override the previous utility tax ordinance that, if I remember correctly, it was a public hearing and I spoke at it, and Councilmember Swindell said, we can't let it sunset because this is how we pay for our fire department. So, That was sometime in the last 4 or 5
Right,
years.
so I think I remember that. I think there was a provision in the first, or a previous ordinance that
Yes.
did have a sunset, and then council took action to adopt a new ordinance that eliminated that sunset. And since then, there's also been an increase in the public utility tax.
And we still don't have the rate steady to know whether or not,
Well, the rate study's independent of the
Right,
public
but
utility tax,
it-
but it's still coming, yeah.
correct, because we've never understood whether or not that the continual increase actually paid for anything, like covered the cost
Right,
of
so-
utilities. Okay.
Exactly. So we're doing an intensive study right now. They're looking at the water plan and the sewer plan, making sure all the capital needs are covered in the rate. We also asked them to look at what a stormwater utility might look like. So we'll be talking to city council about that. That's an option we could do or not. But indirectly, the public utility tax increases because it's based on a percentage of those rates. So you're right, they're directly linked.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Sounds like we have a direction to go, at least for now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is end of the workshop. Motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second. Take vote.
Aye.
Sorry.
We all want to leave.
All right. Adjourn. Not stay here. 9:23.
Oh, yeah.
Have to have like a 2-minute drive.
I'm tired. Oh, well, thank you. I don't know if I did a good job.
I don't want batteries.
I'm just glad I
I
wasn't.
ran the
like,
wire down there.
hostile
Just
one.
didn't-
Oh, yeah, one of the hot ones, one of the hot.
Oh, you bet. So,
Sort of, the mayor calls in, that hot topic one, and I'll be on my phone.
yeah, okay. What I'll do is I'll send something to you so you can have it rather than,